Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, folks, Big Paul here today. I've got a good one for you. We have Ryan Root on with us. Ryan ran one of the U.S.'s biggest UGLs back in the day and went to prison and served his time, and he's going to let us in on all the inside about UGLs, and we'll talk about other stuff too. What's going on, Ryan?
No, it's great to talk to you. Like, one thing I wanted to say first is that I think it's great what you do, the education you provide. You know, you're helping thousands upon thousands of people. And this is stuff that we needed to know, like that, you know, back in the early 2000s, late 90s, we didn't have this, you know, this type of education that you give people. So I really appreciate what we do. And I know thousands of people do. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm trying to save young guys from making all the stupid mistakes that I made.
Exactly.
We were talking about it beforehand. Like, there was just no information on this stuff in the 90s or early 2000s. And you just got whatever the dude at the gym had. As far as I know, all steroids were the same. Like, you hand me D-ball, Anadrol, Deca, like it was just steroids. That's all I knew.
That's exactly correct. The younger people don't understand how hard it was to get steroids back in the day. Like, it was not hard. And then, you know, over half the time you were getting something fake. You're either getting just vegetable oil or a fake pill. And so the market has changed. The environment has changed. Now it's easy to find good quality gear.
It's like ordering from Amazon now.
It's so much easier. You know, it's better though. It's a lot better. Like, I was telling you this before too. In the time I went to prison, when I got out, the whole air that had changed. People were talking about it. And you know, I attribute this a lot to you and some of the other guys that just come out and just start really talking about this, and you normalize the conversation. But people weren't talking about this publicly, even when I went to prison. And then I come out into this new world where the average person is a lot more educated, and it's easier to become educated.
I hope talking about it and normalizing it more will eventually lead us to decriminalization.
It's exactly right.
You know, that's my hope, and I'm an advocate for decriminalization. Prohibition never makes things better. It just doesn't.
We learned that in the 20s with the prohibition of alcohol.
Yeah, it just, you know, I've talked about this with Rick Collins. I don't know if you're familiar with Rick.
Yeah, one of my co-defendants used Rick.
Yeah, I mean, Rick talks about this frequently and how it just makes things worse. You just create a black market and you create
push
crime.
People into the black market. Absolutely.
And that most bodybuilders, the guys that, you know, they're higher income people, they're upper middle class guys. They're not criminals in other aspects of their lives, but because you choose to engage in the sport, you're potentially a felon for possessing PEDs and doing a bodybuilding show. It's absolutely ridiculous. These guys aren't knocking over liquor stores. They aren't out robbing whatever. They're tax-paying citizens that want to do a bodybuilding show. They're just regular guys.
You're absolutely correct. And you know, the lack of education within the medical community too, and the strict regulations, it pushed people into the black market. Like, most of my clients, many of my clients were people who were already on TRT. They just couldn't get the proper dosing protocols.
No.
Or there are people who went to their physician to get TRT and they were turned away. So it was the failure of the medical community to actually understand these compounds and understand how beneficial they can be that pushed so many people into the black market. They created, the government and the medical community created this.
Yeah, they created this. And it is nice that finally it does seem to be that there are some TRT clinics. I know that's what you do now, that are more forward thinking and open-minded about this type of stuff. But I paid for an expensive concierge doctor, and like, some of my blood work was off, and he's like, I think you have something wrong. And I'm like, no, I'm just running gear, man. It's like, I don't have liver failure. There's nothing going on. And I explained to him, and he told me that he wouldn't treat me anymore until I got off of everything. Just like, and he fired me as a client, and I'm paying this dude $3,000 a year for a concierge service. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? That's the attitude you get from the medical community most of the time.
Yeah, that's right. And that's not helping you. That's like it, it becomes more about defensive medicine. It's, and this like goes throughout all of medical practice, not even necessarily just in this field, but it's what can I do to not get in trouble? Not what's best for my patient, not what's, not what will actually help my patient, what will make me look good to my peers, and what will not allow me to get in trouble. It's defensive medicine.
Well, I understand it from the doctor's perspective. They don't want to get sued.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
right. They don't want to lose their license. So they're incentivized to play it conservative.
And that's true. But like, again, prescribing testosterone will not have anybody lose their license. And as we know now, the studies are coming out that it's actually cardioprotective. There's no correlation between cardiac issues and the use of therapeutic doses of testosterone. So, all this evidence is now coming out, and to show that it would have actually been more defensive of them to give people testosterone. They're healthier. They don't have the cardiac issues, the diabetes, and all the other problems that come. And so I understand what you're saying, but it's also no doctors are getting in trouble for prescribing testosterone. It's not happening.
They just don't understand it. And
they just don't understand
way of thinking.
Well, they don't learn about it in medical school. It's not in the paradigm. Like, we put people into this machine, medical students into this machine that spits out providers at the other end. And in that machine, there's nothing on testosterone. It's not in the paradigm. It's not in the curriculum. And they'll tell you that. They'll tell you, yeah, we didn't learn anything about this.
You would be shocked at how many consultations I do with medical doctors.
Oh, yeah.
They come to me to ask me questions about this stuff, and they literally know nothing about it. It's wild.
I do it all the time. I've guided plenty of medical doctors. I used to have medical doctors when I was doing it illegally.
Yeah.
There are plenty of medical doctors that are getting from me.
Yeah, that's wild. So let's talk about the UGL environment a little bit. I know you were at the forefront of it when it transitioned. We talked about it beforehand, how I remember it, and people now have a hard time believing it, but like guys back in the day, they only wanted to run real pharmaceutical stuff. If you didn't have Bayer Testoviron, I didn't want it.
Or at least the name brand stuff, right? So the zeitgeist at the time was different. And you can attribute a lot of that to the amount of fakes that would happen, because back when it was hard to get testosterone, fakes were lucrative because there was such a market for testosterone and there was a low supply. So you could actually sell fakes and make money. So like everybody was concerned about fakes. Like, the whole bodybuilding community, everybody on these forums, like that was the primary discussion on all the forums is what's fake, what's real. And and so people would only trust a few name brands, right? Remember at the time, what was it? British Dragon, like Deca. Oh man, I'm gonna have a brain fart on some of these other brands. Oh, QV, remember Quality Vet?
Yeah, Quality Vet. That was from Mexico, right?
Yeah.
But
there was only a few brands that people would accept, and if you had anything outside of that brand, then they would not only they wouldn't just ignore you, they would berate you and over the internet, just use acrimony to be angry, and they would get angry at anyone trying to sell anything except for one of these main name brands.
Well, that's basically why we only took what the guy at the gym had available in his bag. Like we were talking about it, I ran a lot of Deca and D-ball cycles.
Yeah, right.
You couldn't find testosterone.
You couldn't find test, yeah. So this is where the legend of Deca Dick became born, because people would take whatever they could get in the 90s. You just took whatever, like you said, whatever the guy at the gym had in his bag, and people would just run just Deca, and as we know now, there's a few reasons why Deca alone can cause erectile dysfunction. And so the legend of Deca Dick got born, and people still think that today, like, oh no, because one of my main things is nandrolone is incredibly beneficial, right? And when you add it to a TRT cycle, there's all sorts of reasons why you would add it. Very beneficial for multiple reasons. And when I talk to the average person about, I think it might be good to add nandrolone into your protocol, they're like, oh, I don't want to get Deca Dick. I don't want to get erectile dysfunction. It was like, don't understand that, no, when it's properly blended with testosterone, you're not going to get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually, at least what I see, it's just most of the time when we see erectile dysfunction, it's usually an estrogen issue, either too low or too high.
Yeah. It can also be progesterone because it's
Progesterone,
progestatic.
yeah.
And so some people are sensitive to progesterone, but yeah, it's like it's a few different reasons. But yeah, usually just the lack of estrogen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually an estrogen issue. So what got you into making stuff? What sent you down that path?
So yeah, I guess the story starts when I was younger. I was skinny. I was underdeveloped when I was younger. I used to get picked on because I was so skinny. So I started lifting weights. And from there, I never looked back on lifting weights, but I would still have to work out twice as hard to get the same results as my peers. I was, again, underdeveloped. I wasn't confident. I kind of let people walk on me. I wasn't that well respected. I now know I had low testosterone my whole life, but back again 20 years ago, they wouldn't even test somebody in their 20s for testosterone. They would say, the medical community is, there's no way anybody in their 20s could have low testosterone, so we're not even going to test you. So it wasn't even close to an option. So I started in my early 20s. I started taking testosterone, and it was like a magic bullet. It dramatically improved my quality of life. I immediately put on about 32 pounds, 100 pounds on my bench in about 5 weeks. Like, I just responded. I hyper responded to it. And then my life got so much better, not only from feeling better, from the confidence, the drive that testosterone can give you, but also, now I always had a bodybuilder's mentality, and I always wanted to use modern terms. Like, I identified as a bodybuilder, but I didn't look like one. I worked out like one, but I didn't look like one. And now I actually look like my work ethic. So, the whole, I'd walk into a bar and like the crowd would part out of my way. I'd actually bump into somebody and they would look at me and see, my impressive stature now and apologize to me. I remember I was a plumber when I was in college, and I was terrible at my job. I hated it. But after I started this cycle, my boss gave me a raise for no better reason than I stood before him looking stout all of a sudden. So it's like my whole, and now everybody wanted to befriend me. Everybody respected me. Again, I had gained all this confidence. It was just a different world. I don't know, because I know, like, you've probably always been big. A lot of bodybuilders have always been, bigger people. And I don't know when you started noticing like a difference in the way people treat you, or, when you walk in a room and everybody kind of looks because they're impressive looking, right? But for me, it happened like that. Like, from nothing to all of a sudden, now I kind of look like a bodybuilder. And the change was just stunning to me. Like, so I had to figure out, at the time, I was actually a science major, and I majored in biochemistry.
Oh, cool.
So I had to figure out, what is this? Like, why is this happening to me? Why did this testosterone do this to me? I just took a really small cycle. I took Sustanon and 5 milligrams of D-ball a day, maybe 10 milligrams of D-ball a day. And I had to figure out, like, what did this do to me? So I just started reading voraciously, and then I started tailoring my degree towards the study of hormones, because I couldn't stop reading. I couldn't stop just taking in all the information I could. And then pretty soon, people came to me because they wanted to look like I did. So I started helping people. And after a little bit, everyone kind of in my small city that I lived in knew, if you want to look and feel your best, you just come to me and I'll help you. And so I just, started helping people. And then eventually I was like, well, I'm helping so many people, it's becoming some work. So I have to monetize this. So I started like nailing down supply chains, figuring out where the quality stuff was. I got this really, really good source from China. And then one day, one of my customers mentioned to me this online forum, a source forum. And he said, like, you should do this. These guys are doing what you do. And your prices are actually better than theirs. So I went on to this forum and I started looking, and I'm looking at all the prices, and I'm looking how this whole thing operates. And I said, I can do this. I can compete with these prices. Like, I could do this. So, it was an arduous process, because I didn't know anything about computers at the time. I had to get a server from a different country so that if the federal government did want to start looking in, they would have no jurisdiction to go into a foreign country. So, I had to set up all these different kind of security measures. But it was kind of an arduous process. But after some time, I actually became a source on this forum. And I started out hoping, because, at the time I didn't make much money. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't even afford to go out to eat. Like, it wasn't doing that well. And I was hoping that I could make $200 or $300 extra bucks a week. Like I would have been good. I would have been more comfortable then. And I was hoping for that. And I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought that I was overzealous. And this thing online just blew up. Within 6 months, I was bringing $30,000 a week. After that,
God.
I went to 50,000.
That's a multiplier of 200.
It was insane. Like, it was absolutely insane. I did not even dream that would happen.
And this was before cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah. Well, okay. So cryptocurrency existed. This was around 2010, 2011.
Okay.
It existed, but nobody really used it. I never used it. Nobody else did either. It didn't become popular until like probably 2015 or 2016, like right after I got busted. I never had money. I lived paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't even afford to go to Applebee's to eat, right? And one time I had $100,000 cash at my house. Like, I was just like holding on to it. And I got scared. I got terrified. I'm like, oh my God, this is too much. I'm going to get caught. I was like, I got to quit. Like, this is too much. Like, and, I had a plan to quit. I was like, I'm going to tell all my clients, I'm just going to fill all the orders that I have, tell everybody I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I got terrified. Like, I've never been prone to panic attacks, but if I ever had one, it was right then. And then I started thinking, honestly, a lot of people somebody who does something what I do or what I did, a lot of people just try to wrap it up into this simple explanation, say you were greedy and that's why you did what you did. You just put it in this neat little greedy box and then you can throw it off and that explains it. But that wasn't it. It wasn't about greed. What really turned the corner for me was about helping people. I used to get emails every single day. I still do, but I did then as well, with people thanking me for making them a better father to their children, a better husband to their wives, and a better supporter of their family. Because now they have the energy to go out and work and actually be confident enough to do better and get better jobs, right? So I used to get people who thank me every single day. And what, in that moment when I was scared and I was about to quit, I thought about having to go tell, at the time I probably had like 2,000 clients. It was still early, to tell these 2,000 people that I couldn't serve that. I couldn't help them anymore. That, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I can't help you live a better life just because I'm having a little anxiety at the moment. And then when I just thought of that and I thought about helping all these people and telling these people I couldn't help them, it just like clicked a light on. I said, fuck this. I can do this. I just put my head down, hired a bunch of people because I couldn't do it myself anymore. It was too big. I just started hiring a bunch of people and I set up this whole nationwide system, mailing and
that's crazy
mailing system. And it took off from there. When I was in prison, I had the opportunity to read voraciously. And I read like the story of Google or the story of Phil Knight from Nike, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, having a brain fart. The guy who owns Tesla.
Elon Musk, yeah.
They're all incredibly interesting biographies.
Yeah.
And everybody's story there's a lot of coincidence and luck, but as well as a ton of skill but everything just comes together. And that's kind of what happened with this as well. At the time when I first started, again, the zeitgeist at the time was nobody would buy anything that they didn't recognize a brand name, and they wouldn't buy it from a person they didn't recognize either. So when I first put my list up on the forum, people laughed at me. They're like, look at this joker.
What was your brand? What was your brand name?
Well, so my company was originally BD Supplements because I resold British Dragon. And it's funny how I did that too. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember. There was a company called IP Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. I remember
IP
that.
China, right?
Yep.
That was my source, but they had really good stuff, and it was dirt cheap. When I first started buying stuff from them, this was just for personal use. They would sell it. They would put it in a test tube with a cork on the top, and they would mail it to you that way. And we were taking Sustodon from there, but it was really good. It was like potent. It worked. So like my friends and I would have these test tubes with a cork in the top, and we'd just uncork it, draw the stuff out.
That's wild.
This was like early 2000s, but this stuff was good, and they pressed their own pills. They had these like little micro pills. So they had Anadrol that was a little tiny thing that looked like a Nastrazol pill today, right? Just these tiny things, and it worked. It was all really good stuff. So that they had good stuff. So in 2008, when the real British Dragon went down, they just started slapping BD labels on their stuff and selling it. And a lot of people knew this too. So, but again, it was right at the time where people would only accept brand names they knew. And British Dragon was one of the trusted names. So when they started reselling British Dragon, all of a sudden I had access to that. And I had learned how to talk the guy down. So I was paying cheaper prices than almost anyone in the country just because I talked, I was with him for so long and I talked the price down. So I just had these British Dragon vials at a very, very cheap price at the time. So I was reselling British Dragon, and I called my company BD Supplements. At some point, this guy was flaky sometimes. Sometimes he would just disappear for a month, right? So I couldn't have that. And he did that a few times, and my supply would go down, and I was ordering huge supplies from him. And I'm like, I got to do something about this because, if this guy disappears or something, then I'm done. So I was looking into other brands that I could resell, and they were all just expensive, and I would have to raise my price. And my thing, like one of the things that made me so successful is I went into the business with quality products, good prices. Like I undercut the rest of the market, and fast shipping, good customer service. Like at the time, they were just using snail mail, like the rest of the sources. So it was taking 2 weeks to get a product. I was the first guy at the time to say, I'll just cover the priority charge and ship everybody. Everybody got their products in 2 or 3 days. And that actually drew a lot of people to me because again, now everybody does that. But at the time they were the guys, they weren't thinking, better business. And they were just kind of thinking snail mail, and they were kind of dicks to, I like a lot of the sources, like when you have a bunch of sycophants, like who, and a lot of these sources become sycophants because they got thousands of customers that they have what they need. So they kind of praise them with adulation and everything. So you have these like sycophantish people, and that makes people manic. So you'd have all these sources that were kind of manic, and they were treating their customers like they were way above them, So if a customer had a complaint, they would actually berate them and yell at them. And I could see this over the boards, like these other sources treating their customers kind of like shit. And I vowed I would never do that. So it had a lot to do with great customer service, fast shipping, good price, and quality products, which is a simple business concept, but steroid dealers at the time were not masters of business administration. So their businesses were a mess. And I just came in here and cleaned up the good business practices, and there we go.
That's hilarious. Don't tell me that drug dealers are flaky.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a lot better now, but I'm telling you, nobody else was doing that priority shipping at the time. I remember. That was huge. And now everybody does it. So another thing I did, so I had this British Dragon, right? And my supplier is getting flaky. So I know I got to do something. And at the time, I didn't know how to make stuff. I know, after that, I learned how to make my own stuff, and I made, I've made thousands and thousands of vials. But at the time I didn't know how to do it. But there was one guy in my town who did, and he was like a competitive local dealer. Like we live in a small city, and all the dealers knew each other, and we're all amicable with each other. And so one day I just took this to him, and I'm like, because I didn't tell anybody what I was doing, because one of the the local game was going to get me busted, right? Because if the local cops caught on and was doing so, I made everybody in my operation, you have to keep quiet because the local game is what's going to bust us. I actually stopped selling locally too, because I didn't want, because the nationwide business was so, obviously so much more lucrative. So we just I just went into hiding locally, and then we just distributed nationally. So I had to go to one of these dealers, and I just, these other dealers who I knew made his own stuff. But he just knew how to make his own stuff, and he was just selling glass vials without a label on it. And a lot of people didn't trust it, again, at the time. But I knew that I could professionally label these things and make it look better if I could get this guy to help me make it. So I just took this business opportunity to him, and he bit on it, and he just started making huge vats of this stuff. And we're bottling it and labeling it. And at first, I was just going to sell it next to my BD stuff. And I didn't think it would do well, right? Because again, it's not a brand that anybody recognizes. It was just our own brand. And again, at the time, there had been a few UGLs that were successful, but it was right in the beginning. So it was right in the beginning of the emergence and acceptance of UGLs. Now that's all there is, right? But then there weren't too many around. So then what I learned when I so the name of the product was Matrix Lab Steroids, and you can still Google that today. You'll get all these reviews, all these really good reviews. When I put it up on my site, on my list, right? I didn't expect it to sell well, again, but it did instantly. Everybody just went for those because it was a little cheaper. I sold a little bit cheaper. And I learned that I was the brand. Like, I had created my own brand. People trust whatever I would put up there because I was careful to make sure that I put up good products, and people started trusting me. So whatever I put up there, people would buy. And they took to Matrix immediately. And then the label, the name Matrix, started running through all the forums. Everybody was talking about it on every forum out there, and it just became huge. And then so shortly after that, sure enough, the British Dragon guy disappeared. And if I hadn't, and it was right in time, it was only a few months later when I introduced the Matrix. And if I hadn't done that at that time when I did it, my business would have crumbled because that guy disappeared. So it was coincidental.
I'm looking up this stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you Google Matrix Lab Steroids.
Yeah, I found it. It's interesting, man. So that's kind of when it took off, really took off.
Yeah. So my profit margin with the BD was like 400%, I think. And I did these numbers, and I think this is right. But it's a hell of a lot cheaper to make your own. You can make and that's another thing. I used to sell only 20 milliliter vials because I think the 10s, for us, like a 10 milliliter was a waste of time. So I only sold 20 milliliter vials.
Yeah, I'm going through. Sometimes I'm going through 10 milliliter vial test in a week and a half, whatever.
Yeah, right. yeah, it's crazy. So I only made 20 milliliter vials, and I made things a little stronger when I could, and I made sure that actually everything was dosed a little bit high just to make sure that it was quality. And I'll tell you the story in a little bit too about how we did quality control, about how I came down with the powder sources that I did, because that was pretty crazy too. But that also allowed me to be even more successful. The profit margin. Yeah. So now my profit margin was like over 1,000% because, you can make a vial. I could make a 20 milliliter vial for like $5.
That's wild.
And the prices were cheaper, but the profit margin was higher. So now we're pulling in more money, and it was crazy. I mean, it was just crazy. It just blew up. Like, I couldn't even.
What do you do with all this money?
Like, stupid things. Yeah. So at the time there wasn't, I couldn't put it into a bank. I couldn't
right.
So I did, besides extravagant vacations, about every 6 weeks, I would go out and just take a bunch of friends and go on these extravagant vacations. I started buying houses and then remodeling. Cause I can, what I could do, I couldn't buy a house outright. So, but I could get a owner finance. Owner finance. And a lot of times what I do is just pay them all the cash for the house and just say, here, put it on an owner finance, and I'd pay it off really quickly. Right. But then I could also remodel with cash. So I started buying houses and remodeling them and then renting them. And that was a big thing. And then these extravagant vacations. And I had 12 people in my operation. So like all the money that came in, like it wasn't all mine. So you know, these guys all made good money too.
And I'm sure that set red flags off.
Well, no, because I did it in a way that you mean the houses?
I would imagine the government's going to catch up on the cash at some point.
Yeah, they never really caught into that.
That's funny.
The money collection was interesting too, because again, at the time there was no cryptocurrency. Well, it existed, but nobody knew about it. So I had to anonymously collect, like millions of dollars a year, and and so it became a problem at one point. At one point, I was making too much money. Like I was making so much money, it was getting hard to collect. It was a stupid problem to have, but it was a problem. Like I couldn't collect all the money that was coming in. And it started to come down to, there was a couple things I did. I could collect Western Union cash. The problem is each person can only collect like $30,000 a year before they won't let another person pick up more than like 30,000. So I had to have an army of people picking up Western Union. Then I don't know if you remember those green dot cards, or then there was Reload It, and there was a whole bunch of different companies that had all these little cards. So I started using those. Like somebody in California could pick up a code, pay for a code, they'd give it to me, and I'd put it on this card, right? So that was an anonymous way for me to get money. Problem is, like those cards only hold so much money, and you can only do so much cash through those, or they'll shut the card off for potential fraud. And I had to learn all the amounts that you could do on these cards. So what I used to do is I used to go pay people. I'll pay $100, get me one of these cards and give it to me. Or some people I would just say, get all these cards, and they'd have like 10 different cards in their name. And I'd give them like 6% or 10% to just pull the money and give me the cash off of the cards.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It was to collect money.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It was. It was crazy.
What eventually got the eye of law enforcement on you?
Okay. So it was kind of funny. At one point, I moved out of my small city and I moved to the greater New York City area and to a penthouse, right? Overlooking Manhattan. It was gorgeous. The day I move in, right? I pay all the money. The day I move in, one of my shippers called and said, one of the boxes leaked and the post office is opening it. Now, so to explain this, I have to explain exactly how my operation ran. And I made some mistakes here, which I fixed later. I had chemists all over the country, right? I had shippers all over the country. The idea was, like, I didn't even know some of these guys. I actually found a lot of my employees through customers. They just wanted to work. And I wouldn't just be like, oh, you want to work? Okay, come do this. You know, I talked to them for a while and slowly started giving them responsibilities. And a lot of them worked out really, really well. So I had these guys all over the country doing a specific job. And the idea was to compartmentalize everybody's job. So and each person doesn't know anybody else in the operation. So if one person gets busted, it doesn't bring down the whole operation. So I had chemists making stuff in one country. I'd send them powders from China. They'd make everything, and then they'd put it in these big boxes and bubble tape it and wrap it really well, and then ship it to a shipper that's in a different state. And then, you know, the shipper would fill all the orders. So one of the things I did wrong is in the beginning, I had the chemist send the package directly to the shippers. And what I learned later is that I had to have them send to a receiving house that was empty, right? And I changed that later. So anyways, one of these times the chemist sent it to the shipper, and they must have destroyed this box, but some vials broke and it leaked through. So the post office now can open it to make sure it's nothing hazardous. They open it, they find everything that's in there. They go to the house where it was supposed to go. And the shipper, we actually were warned, so we got most of the stuff out, but there was still a little bit of powders and shipping material in this house. So this person, so there's two people there, and they scared the shit out of one of them. One of them was somebody that was a personal assistant of mine. And this was the problem. This is where the problem was a personal assistant of mine. Kind of because they were a personal assistant, they started being able to get to know a lot of the members in my operation and started to be able to connect dots. And then they wanted a job because they saw how much more money they could make being a shipper than a personal assistant, right? So eventually I gave this person the job, and the cop scared the crap out of her, and she blew in everything she knew. So she kind of blew in the whole
man.
The other person just shut up and said, no, I'll get a lawyer. I bought him a lawyer, and you know, but the other person already blew in everything. So what happened at that point, though, now that would eventually get us caught, but it took them a long time. Again, I had a lawyer for that person, and that lawyer was talking, you know, with the police about the whole situation. And eventually they decided that the feds were not going to pick that case up.
Oh, wow.
So it was just local. So we just stayed out. That was New York State. So we just stayed out of New York and continued the operation. That was it. A couple people got felonies, a couple low-level felonies. Nobody spent a day in jail. That was it. So we just kept going. You know, after a while, the rest of the crew was like, come on, let's keep going. It's done. We'll just stay out of New York. No big deal. Okay. So we kept going.
Oh,
but
man.
Eventually the feds did pick that up. And like 2.5 years later is when we got busted from that. But that started their investigation.
I mean, if you had packed it all up at that time, you think you would have walked away?
That's the interesting part, because I don't think so, because they picked everything up and had an evidence. Well, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it may have been hard for them to get it, actually, because, you know, what I learned later is one of the main reasons that we got caught was they were able to decipher the web of phones, of text messages, and through all the burner phones that we had and everything. If we used a service like Wicker or Signal that has disappearing messages, or even Snapchat, I don't know if they would have been able to catch us, because that was really all the evidence they had was the text messages. Nothing else, because they even, like, they had a couple of cops buy packages, but what does that mean? Like, it was all anonymous. Like, a cop receives the package, but they don't know from who.
That is wild, man.
They didn't have a ton of evidence. They didn't have a ton of evidence that led directly to people. I mean, one of the problems is with conspiracy charges, they don't need much evidence. So all they need is, they had 10 people indicted. If 9 of them pointed to me and said that guy was the leader, then that's all the evidence they needed.
That is completely wild.
It was crazy.
Man, it just seems like it just sort of spiraled out of control on its own.
It did. It just got so big so fast. And then, like I said, I was working in an emergency room at the time, and I would go to the emergency room all day, come home, do emails and pack orders all night until 5 a.m. and then go to sleep for a few hours, get up and have to do the whole day over again, until, you know, finally I couldn't do it on my own. I had to quit. I quit the day job, obviously, after a little while. And then I just had to start hiring people. And then that's when I developed this system of, let's keep everybody isolated and in different states. So the jurisdiction, it would have had to be a federal operation to catch us. Because a state operation, we were just too spread out. They wouldn't have been able to do anything.
So like back at the beginning, I'm sure you had no idea that it would end up there.
No, I hoped I could make $200 extra a week. That's what I was like. And I thought, like, that's probably a little crazy to think I could make that much.
That is crazy, man. That is crazy. And so, like, what happened when they came and knocked on your door? I mean, when did it all go down?
Yeah, so I was in my penthouse in overlooking Manhattan, and at 5 a.m. somebody started pounding on the door. Now, I had just got back from Vegas, and so I was not doing so well. I was still really hungover. It was Wednesday, September. I'm trying to remember. It was September 17th, maybe. Or no, I think the arrest was September 20th. Anyways, of 2015. So I just got back from Vegas, so I was still hungover a few days later, and somebody's pounding at the door at 5 a.m. My girlfriend at the time got up to go to the door, and I just kind of slowly put some clothes on, and then I heard the pounding again. Like, in my mind, I'm like, am I really hearing this? My dogs were barking. And then, so I slowly put clothes on, and now I'm getting mad. I'm like, who the hell is pounding on my door at 5 a.m.? I'm about to go show them that they're not to do that. Right. So I put my shirt on and I'm storming out there and I'm mad. And she comes back and she says, they have their finger over the peephole. I can't see who's out there. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go take care of this. And I go out there and I rip open the door, and it's just a line of cops with their guns pointed at my head.
Oh man. That had to have been a shit your pants moment.
Yeah. I mean, I just like it all came together pretty quickly.
In the back of your mind, you had to have known it was coming at some point, right?
I did. I knew it could come to that. You're always kind of looking over your shoulder, right? So like I remember like just even seeing cops like pull down into, we lived by the Hudson River, and cops, pulling in there, and I'd always be suspicious of each one. And to be honest with you, none of that was probably anything, but like you just start getting this feeling like this is getting too big, because it just kept growing. It kept getting bigger and bigger.
I can't imagine the paranoia and anxiety.
Yeah.
Could have been fun.
Especially I was on so much test, I had high estrogen, and my anxiety was even worse.
Were you relieved?
Before? A small part of me, it was like, yeah, I don't have to deal with that anymore. I mean, it sucked really bad, but I guess that was a small benefit, is that I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore. And that's what's great about what I do right now too, is like, I don't have to look over my shoulder, and it feels so much better.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine it's a fun way to live your life,
but I also had a lot of fun. While
it lasted, it was great, right?
It was. Like I even published like short chapters of my story, and I haven't finished it yet, but it is online. Memoirs of a Steroid Kingpin. Like people can go look it up, because I started writing a book because somebody wanted to pay me to write a book.
Yeah, you got to write a book, I would think.
I wrote it's partially done, and you can read the chapters that are out there. And in there, I talk about, I talk a lot about, I really try to, instead of just telling the story and the glitz and glamour, like I really wanted to dive into the mindset of somebody who does one of these operations, like exactly what I was thinking at the time. And, also some of the business aspects of what made this so successful. Like what was the reason behind it?
And we're running it like an entrepreneur, or what, like a businessman.
Yeah. I ended up making a lot of moves that were incredibly beneficial. And I forgot to so another way that I deferred the money was for all the powders. I was collecting the money myself, and then paying the Chinese people all these money for the powders, right? So it was the transactions, and then it was hard for me to collect all that money. So one way that I was able to defer a lot of the money is, this seems simple, but it's something you don't think about. And this simple thing actually saved me tons and work to collect all this money. But I just started having clients send it directly to the Chinese people, so that it was bypassing my hands. So now I didn't have to worry about collecting it, and it went right to them, and they were just keeping an account. So now I could just pull powders out. I was getting 10 kilograms a week in powders.
Holy shit. How do you get all that through customs?
They did it. They were good at it. And if one gets caught, which it rarely did, honestly, 10 kilograms a week, and it rarely got one caught. And if it did, they just resend it.
That's wild to me.
And so that was another thing. Like I paid tons of people just to pick things up. They were just receiving houses. So I had like an army of people who, I'd paid them $100 to $200 a package just to receive it and drop it off to me when they got it, or to drop it off to one of my chemists usually.
That's wild. That's really wild to me. And holy crap. And so like, how long did it take to get through did you cop a plea, or did you, I
just pled guilty right away. Like, I know how the feds work too. Like if you start giving them too much trouble, they'll start weaponizing your family or your friends or your family. And in order just to keep everybody safe and to I just immediately just said, okay, you got me. I mean, I was guilty. Like, that's one thing that's important to understand. Like I am accountable. I knew it was illegal when I was doing it. I am accountable for those actions. And I do, I do understand that.
I
So
could
I just
see
wouldn't
where
go
it
near
would
it.
be easy to slip down that. I mean, it would be hard to walk away from. It's not like you had a whole enterprise going, people
Yeah,
depending on you. And, people were, not just the end user customers, but the people that were making money as a result of you. I'm sure
yeah,
I mean, that had to come into your mind too,
yeah.
when you're thinking about things. It's interesting. I read recently that when the feds come knocking on your door, they have a 95.4 or 99.4 success rate. That only, I think it was 0.6%. Don't quote me on that, of
No,
federal
and you're
cases
right, but
actually get
it's not
overturned.
because the people are necessarily guilty or or fully guilty, right? So
They're just very good at
it's
convicting
pure
people.
but it's pure, like, that this is part of the problem with the whole criminal justice system, is that they have so many advantages, right? Like, so for instance, one of the first thing to do is the paper goes and gets the story from the prosecutors, right? And that's all they hear. Nobody ever called me. Nobody ever
No,
called one of my co-defendants and said what happened. The prosecutor comes out and they paint this villainous story. If you read the article on me in the paper, when you Google my name, it's the first thing that comes up. I mean, it looks terrible. It makes me look like some, like, like some guy who didn't give a shit and was incredibly selfish and was only looking to get over and didn't care who he hurt, right? And now, if anybody you talk to, it couldn't be farther from the truth. Like, I paid all my employees well. I was, I care about everybody. The main thing I was trying to do is help people.
right.
But they paint this picture of you, right? So now you have public perception of this, and that's one of the worst things. The preconceived notions come in that this guy's a terrible guy, he's got to go to prison. And then throughout the whole process, for instance, I got 2 more years than I should have. And I, once I got into prison, I had time and I actually started piling through my case. And then I learned the law and wrote my own appeals. I took my own case to the Supreme Court because I was right. And I was right. And there's no question that you could deny that there was a charge. There's a few things that happened that shouldn't have been there. And I was put in prison for 2 years, 2 more years than I should have. Now, this happens to over half, I'm going to say damn near 75 to 80% of the prison population. They're put in for longer than they should go. And this is part of the problem with the criminal justice system is, they throw all this, the prosecution just throws all this stuff at you. And it starts, it gets really confusing. Your defense attorney. So this is how the court system works up. You have a defense attorney who used to clerk for the judge. You have a prosecutor who also used to clerk for the judge. They're all buddies because they work together every day. You have your defense attorney is trying not to piss off the judge or the prosecutor because they all have to work together. It's them working together, and you're not really getting a true defense. So, not only did my lawyer just overlook a crazy amount of things, and this happens with just about every case. You just have the shit show of what ends up. You get a prosecution who has a 96 or 97, whatever it is, percent conviction rate, and you have a prison population. The United States incarcerates the highest percent of its population than any country in any other country in the world,
even
by
China.
far.
Yeah,
by far.
yep.
And that's what you get from this, from this type of, and that's why there really needs to be criminal justice reform. And
yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I don't understand how we can call ourselves a free country when you don't have, if you don't have sovereignty over your own body, like what you put in your own body. That is mind blowing to me.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah,
I just don't think there's a more fundamental right outside of freedom of speech, control over your own body, what you put in your own body.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And there's the leaders of the free world stuff the most people in cages than any other country in the world. And that's what we do. And you're absolutely correct. And if you want to go further, the controlled substance, what should be a controlled substance is a state right. There's dual sovereignty, and the federal government has no jurisdiction over that. It should be a state right. Like, the Constitution is clear on that. So there should be no federally controlled substance. It should be up to the state, like what substances are controlled and what aren't.
And you see some states challenging that now, like Oregon and places like that.
Right. So we've seen it. So I think, the story of marijuana is similar to the story of testosterone. Testosterone is just farther behind, right? But it's coming the same way. Like with marijuana, we started to see states just ignore the federal controlled substance, right? Because it's really not up to the government to control a substance. So, or the federal government to control a substance. So all of a sudden states just started selling it, right? And the whole story of stigmatization of marijuana, very similar to testosterone, and I can see it going in the same direction. And that's what I want to do with my business. Once I get more followers on my channels and once I get a bigger audience, I want to lead a charge to deschedule testosterone. And there's already been talk about it, and I know how to do it. It's not simple. You just got to get the people together, and you have to put the people in office, or at least threaten to put the people in office who will do what the people want, right? Because this is a democracy.
I mean, if you look at the literal definition of what should be Schedule 3, it doesn't even fit the definition.
No.
I mean, it's not like people are getting high off of testosterone. You're not dying from it. You can shoot a whole bottle and not die.
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
Right. It's not a threat to society.
When you look at it, and it's hard to, what happened is, because I've taken a lot of time to dissect this. And what happened is, since the path to demonization testosterone took since the 1980s, when it started to become banned by the Olympic Committee, it started to be banned by all professional sports. It became a controlled substance in the 1990 Steroid Control Act.
Yeah.
Therefore, the medical community, people just started to eschew these compounds, right? It gained a stigma about it. All the stuff where it was considered cheating through Major League Baseball. It just had the stigma attached to it. And now that it's a controlled substance, it makes it harder to research, hard if not impossible to really research. So now, we have these antiquated notions and dogma that the medical community believes about these compounds. And it just had this stigma similar to marijuana. So, that's kind of what happened to it.
Yeah, and it's wild. Like so much of the stuff could be therapeutically used. I mean, I'm just thinking like guys recovering from it's just wild to me. Like orthopedic surgery, for example. I had my ACL replaced a few years back, and I ran some growth hormone, some peptides, and a little bit of testosterone and anavar, and I was healed up in like 30% less time than what the surgeon had anticipated. And he's like, I don't even know. He's like, what did you do? And I told him, and he's like, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
You're exactly right.
Right. I mean, I heal up faster and I am stronger than I was before. Why wouldn't you want that for your patient?
It's just ignorance, and what they don't understand, they believe you shouldn't do. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if it's that they're so busy that they don't have time to do the research. Right. But if you research this stuff, you'll see that, anavar, oxandrolone causes improves collagen synthesis. Like all these peptides, BPC 157, TB 500 are fantastic for helping your body heal. I did the same thing. I tore my bicep, had it fixed, and I healed in record time from that, from the same thing that you did, peptides and oxandrolone.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you want that for your patient? That just makes zero sense to me. So backing up a little bit, so obviously you went to prison. How long were you in for?
So my sentence was 78 months, which is 6.5 years. But I, with good time, and I did some programs, I did a little over 4 years.
I mean, that's
I'm still on probation.
That's still a long time. What was that like?
So I'm nonviolent, right? So I was in camps. So it wasn't like you see in the movies. I wasn't in a high security. There was no cells. There wasn't even a fence. It's like open.
I'm sure it still sucked though.
Yeah, it still sucked. What I can say is the prospect of doing prison time is worse than actually doing it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it sucked. And just the fact that you're out of society and you can't contribute if you want to, that's really hard to take. And then just being isolated from all the people that it's really hard to take. And but it sucked, but you can make the most of it while you're in there.
Yeah, I know you mentioned reading. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah,
there's some things
I
you can
learned a
do.
lot. I just decided I was going to use all the time to educate myself. I wrote the business plan for this business while I was in there. Read voraciously, just learned, learned a lot. And
Well, it's good that you maximized that time and
yeah,
made something of it. I mean, it could be a time to, like you said, to reflect and learn and grow as a person as well.
yeah. You know, so what I got to do is, I got to be around a lot of other nonviolent drug dealers. Like, over half the prisons are nonviolent drug dealers. So I got to be around a lot of other ones, and this is the Fed, so it was some pretty big time dealers. And I noticed the commonality, like, what I was talking about before about people like to say, oh, you're a drug dealer, you're making all this money, you did it because you're greedy, right? Or you don't care about people. And nothing could be farther from the truth. Like I got to know a lot of these guys, and these guys were some of the nicest guys. They got your back. If you need anything, these guys will help you. They're looking to help people. It's so a lot of this is mischaracterized. A
Yeah.
lot of what's in prison is mischaracterized. Again, I was in a camp, nonviolent. It's different up in the max security, but it's a significant portion of the prison population is the nonviolent.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you look at the statistics on it. I think it was over half when I was looking at
Over
prison
half are
statistics.
nonviolent drug offenders. Over
Yeah.
half the prison population in the entire United States.
Yeah, it's really wild. I remember looking at this statistics. My girlfriend, she's a PhD sociologist, and we were talking about this and looking at studies, and it's just there's a lot of people. I mean, in my view, the people that should be locked up are people that pose a threat
Right.
to society. Some
Yeah.
sort of risk or threat to society, and I don't see that type of person really posing any sort of threat.
That's exactly right. And we've learned this lesson from alcohol, right? We're learning it again with marijuana. Like, you prohibit something, you create a black market. The black market makes things worse. When during Prohibition, more people died in the name of controlling alcohol because it spawned gangs, it spawned this black market, this lucrative black market. So much that the government had to legalize it again. A, because everybody wanted to drink and nobody was really following the law, and B, once they legalized it again, all the violence stopped,
Went away.
It just went away, and now the government can tax it. Now instead of paying to put people in prison and paying people to enforce the regulation of it, now the government can make money off it. It boosts the economy because now citizens are making money off of alcohol. The same thing is happening with marijuana. It's becoming a windfall for the government. It's increasing the economy. Testosterone is the next logical thing. Like, how much money they're spending controlling all this? And
yeah, it's just a waste of resources. I could be wrong about this, and you may know. I think it was Portugal that went through, and it was a while ago, maybe 10 years ago, went through and just legalized everything. They had a huge crime problem, and crime dramatically went down.
Yeah, yeah. And we've learned this lesson before. It's not the first time. That's the thing, and it has to do with just these like overwhelming. Like, for instance, what kind of caused this? What caused the war on drugs? Right? And over time, we've seen this happen. An election tactic, and we've seen this since the beginning of elections, is to make the people afraid of something and offer a solution to it. So in 1988, Just Say No to Drugs, the Reagan administration just said, we have this problem, and they said, here's a scary problem, drugs. We're going to take care of it. If you vote for us, we're going to take care of it. They got elected and imposed all of these harsh drug laws. The federal prison population went from 20,000 in the 80s to over 200,000 in the early 2000s. We had that kind of huge increase just from the drug laws.
Yeah, that's wild.
And it's more of an election tactic. Make the people afraid of something, offer them a solution, and then they'll elect you. It's an election.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
we've seen it over time. We've seen that tactic used over time.
Yeah, it's
so what you do is you convince the people that this is a bad thing. You stigmatize something, and it just gets this air of, oh, that's awful.
So I got to ask you, and this is a question that I get a lot of people ask. It's about the quality. Now, I don't know how plugged you're in or in anymore. If you can even talk about it, if you can't, that's fine. But people are all the time terrified of fakes and bad stuff from UGLs that are currently out there now.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not nearly a problem that it was for us in the late 90s, early 2000s.
No, that's been my experience.
It's so much easier to find quality products because you can just go online and you have all the ratings. Like you have these sources that are rated by thousands and thousands of people. And if you
test kits now, if you even trust those things, but
yeah, so I don't think it's hard to find something that's not fake or find something that's quality these days. So, one of the stories I was going to tell is another reason I became so successful is now you have labs you can send things to, like the Janko lab, right?
Yeah.
You have these labs that will actually test your products and send you the test results. They didn't have that back when we were doing it. So I was lucky enough to find a guy who was an assistant professor at a college, and he was doing mass spectrometry on a few of his own products. And he kind of let us in that he'll do that for us too and test our products.
That's pretty wild.
So I would just send him this stuff and then he'd test it and then send me the results. But and that was helpful. But even before that, so nobody was testing their stuff because it was almost impossible. So the way I did it is I got my customers to help me, right? So once you start to get big, you have all these powder suppliers from China come to you, right? So I must have had 100 different powder suppliers. And I would take samples from each of them. I said, send me your samples. I would have the guys make them up, and then we'd test it kind of on ourselves first. And then what I would do is I'd get my customers to help me. I would get a few guys, I would give them some really reduced price stuff, and I would send it to them. I said, now go get a blood test, on this day after you would do an injection, right? And I wanted to see when the peak of everything would be. And I'd said, send me your blood test. And so essentially I would pay all these customers to do the blood tests and everything. And I would get all these results. So now I could actually have actionable results where and data of which suppliers. So I whittled it down to like the top 5 suppliers of consistent quality. And I was able to uniquely narrow it down to I probably had the best quality products because of that in the country at that time, just because nobody else was doing that. Everybody else was just getting it from one supplier. And I tested hundreds of suppliers.
I know everybody gets like hung up on fake Primo. That's the thing I hear all the time now. Everybody's worried about
it's like, I hear that a lot too. And it's not that hard to get. It's not that hard to get Primo. Because you can get the powders. The only reason to fake Primo is if you have a guy that is trying to make more money, right? Because Boldenon's a lot cheaper, right? So if you got a guy, well, I'm going to charge Primo prices and put Boldenon in there, and my profit margin is going to be higher. But you're risking your name, your reputation, you're risking a lot by doing that. And it doesn't make sense to do it because you can just get real Primo. I know a lot of
and it sounds like making money is not an issue.
They're sending you the wrong powders, but like all the suppliers I had were sending real Primo. Like that's when I had that guy testing it in the lab, like that's what we were able to do. We were able to distinguish the compounds and the quality. And I never had a problem getting real Primo. I guess I don't know. It could be different now.
I think people just get over anxious about stuff.
That's a huge thing about the bodybuilding community, right? Is they can be some of the most loyal people, but they're also very anxiety ridden. They don't like to trust a lot of people, especially in the early 90s when there was a lot not to trust. But these days, if you because of the online presence, if you're a bad supplier, you will get barraged by the public and all the forums, and everybody will know to stay away from you. Like you can't survive. Like, and these dealers, if they get a bad product, they are online writing about it immediately. So there's no escaping. If you're a bad supplier, there's no escaping it. Like you're just going to get weeded out really quickly. So the people who have risen to the top are, they were there for a reason.
So one thing I got to ask you, and this is sort of going back to the days when you were making a bunch of money doing this, did you ever think about just getting out of the country and going somewhere else?
Yes. Yeah, I started to make a plan to go to Thailand.
Yeah, that seems to be where all these guys end up.
Yeah. It just never came to fruition. And I thought, because I could have ran the operation from a different country. I thought about it.
Yeah, and I don't know how much that protects you, but
Yeah.
you can never come back, I guess.
Yeah, right.
That's the trade-off. But I mean, I guess now you have a clean slate and you're starting over. Let's talk about what you're doing now. Where's your life at now?
Yeah. Thank you. So, I tell that story a lot of times. It is entertaining, but also what it does is it shows the aggregation of empirical data I've gained over the years, right? Because the testosterone and its derivatives were controlled substances. It's hard to research them. The medical community doesn't really use them. I guided over 20,000 people through the use of hormones, and I was the main person people would come to guide them through all these things. I would take a look at blood work. I would do all kinds of things. I had my stuff was running through the pro circuit at the time. So I had a lot of pros. I was helping design hormone protocols to step on stage. I've just done this on such a level, and I've been able to, because of the position I was in, I've been able to aggregate more empirical data than just about anybody else in the country could have, unless they had my history. I've just seen it and experienced it so much. So I tell that to tell this, that it's more of a story of redemption, right? Now I want to do this safely, legitimately, legally, again, with an emphasis on long-term safety and health, good health markers, right? So, but plus I understand the compounds more, some of the other derivatives, nandrolone, oxandrolone, than, a lot of the other clinics, they just don't know how to use them, or they won't use them. But they're incredibly beneficial. A lot of them. There's certain circumstances where they're better to use than just testosterone alone, right? So, so I just have a better understanding, and I've seen this so much, so I can give we just have more knowledge at hormonesforme.com than just about anywhere else in the country. Again, because of my background.
Yeah, it is sort of a golden age of information now with as far as how to do this stuff. There's a lot of good information out there. There's still some bad stuff. There's people saying some really bad shit, but it's kind of cool that you do have access to a lot of good information. Just
in the time I was in prison, when I came out, a lot of stuff had changed. It was, people talked about it more. The conversation was normalized, and that's why I thank you and a lot of the other guys for doing what you do, because you help do this. You help normalize this conversation.
Man, believe me, I had some sleepless nights thinking about talking about this stuff, because I've been doing it off and on since I was a teenager, man.
Yeah.
30 years, man, basically.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I have a legit business. I have kids. I have a family, and I'm just a recreational bodybuilder at the end of the day. I just competed my first national show. I'm like, this is
you look great, by the way.
Thank you. It's just something I do for fun. And I'm like, do I really want to talk about this and put things? It used to be just talking about it was a risk.
Yeah.
And maybe it still is. I don't know. But my hope is to normalize the conversation, and hopefully some people realize it's not the boogeyman they think it is. And then eventually we move towards decriminalization. I think that's where what happened with marijuana is people started talking about it and actually talking about it, not being the boogeyman that everybody thought it was.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. Yeah.
And exactly what you said before, prohibition never makes anything better. It just creates more crime.
We have plenty of history that proves that too. And it just the refusal of the administrations to look back in history and see that this has never worked before. Why would it work now?
And I think with the fentanyl crisis and things like that, I'm like, is testosterone really something we need to be worried about?
That's exactly right. So I was busted in Operation Cyber Juice. It was an operation to bust a bunch of the online.
I remember that. Yeah.
Steroid companies, and it got critical review. Like, people started writing in saying, why are you, like, how many millions did you spend on this huge operation to do something that nobody really cares about? So they haven't done another operation like that since, largely because it didn't go over well. The people were not happy with spending the money on something that nobody cared about.
Cyber Juice. What a weird, silly name.
Operation Cyber Juice.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I hope that at some point it will be decriminalized and people don't have to worry about this type of stuff, and they can actually get legit medical help.
It's headed that way, and it just takes the people to come together. What we have to do is get the audience, and then we all have to focus on the government, putting the people, or threatening to put the people in office who will deschedule testosterone. And I also have plans, to get lobby groups too. Having a lobby group on your side is always hugely beneficial.
I mean, what bodybuilder wouldn't want to work with a medical professional and have real medical grade pharmaceuticals?
If you could, right?
If you could, right? I would much rather go that route.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, again, you're just pushing people into the black market. Like, the government created the black market.
I mean, I literally don't even drink alcohol, man.
Yeah, I don't either anymore.
I mean, it's like this is the only thing I do.
Yeah.
I pay my taxes. I work hard every day.
Yeah.
I'm pretty boring otherwise, besides bodybuilding. I take a little extra testosterone and some growth hormone, some Primo, so that's where I'm at. All right, man. You want to plug you have your clinic now, right?
Yeah. Thanks for putting it up on the screen there. But hormonesforme.com. We can treat people in New York, Florida, and Vermont right now, but I'm working hard to get more licenses to more states.
That's awesome, man. That is really cool, man. Well, congratulations on getting that moving forward. I'll put information in the video description below so people can get a hold of you. I'll put all your contact information and about your clinic. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me, man.
Right.
This is an awesome story. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Again, thank you for what you do too. This education is necessary, and I wish I had it when I was younger. I wish
there's a bunch of us out there trying to do it, and you can contribute too. All right, man. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.